This is Floss Weekly. I'm Doc Searls. Simon Phipps and I are talking this week with Marten Mickos, who now runs HackerOne, which is this fantastic and interesting new company. Not that new. He's been at it for 8 years already, but it's really big and really important and has an enormous history in the open source world, especially with small businesses that get big. And we talk about all of that and far more, and that is coming up next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is Floss Weekly, episode 639, recorded July 21st, 2021. Open source and big business. This episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Hover. Whether you're a developer, photographer, or a small business, Hover has something for you to expand your projects and get the visibility you want. Go to hover.com/twit to get 10% off your first purchase of any domain extension for the entire first year. And by Melissa. With the world starting to reopen, you want to make sure that your customers' data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. Good afternoon, good morning, good whatever it is, wherever you are. I am Doc Searls, and this is Floss Weekly. And I am joined this week by Simon Phipps, who is back in his normal, if there is normal. I don't know if there is normal anymore. Is there normal for you? Is this a normal place for you?
This is my normal lair that I'm in down here, down on the edge of the woods in my my Unihacker cabin in the woods.
You're not sending any cryptic letters by to people you don't like from your Unihacker.
No. There's a reasonable amount of crypto around, but it isn't in letters to the U.S. newspapers, so you're good at the moment.
Yeah, this is in Southampton for those who.
This is in Southampton.
Want to keep exact track.
I'm down in the south of England, as far south as you can go without having to cross any ocean, and I'm actually sitting looking at the lightning maps, seeing that the storm that you're experiencing in Manhattan is actually over New Jersey. It's just south of Hoboken.
Over New Jersey, yeah. Well, New Jersey is about a mile west of here, actually, so it's pretty close to where I am at the north end of Manhattan, near the George Washington Bridge, for those of you who know where that is. Great new movie called In the Heights about exactly our neighborhood. Not about us. We're not in the movie, but our building is. You can see our building from there.
If you learn to dance like the people in that show, then you're doing really well.
Yeah. So you have a past that overlaps with our guest Marten Mickos.
Yes,
we were both at Sun at roughly the same time. Yeah.
So Marten had been helping MySQL be a successful business, and I was a part of the crew at Sun Microsystems that acquired MySQL for an obscene amount of money in the mid-2000s. And so we had to spend quite a lot of time talking, and I spent quite a lot of time with Monty Widenius rather than with Marten, because I was much more on the community and tech side. But so our paths significantly crossed at Sun Microsystems.
I remember Monty and David when they were both on a boat with Linux Journal on one of our geek cruises early on, and there was a rival MySQL guys on the same boat, and so there was this kind of cats hissing at each other sort of thing going on. But it was between them, not between anybody with Sun or later Acquisitors or any of the people caring about licensing and the rest of it. But we'll talk about all that. But first, I have to let everybody know that this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Hover. It's time to make plans and let Hover help you achieve them. If you're a blogger, creating a portfolio, building an online store, or just want to make more memorable, redirect to your LinkedIn page, Hover has the best domain names and email addresses just for you. Email at your domain name is key to connecting with customers and building trust for your brand. They have domain-based emails for all your needs, small or large. It's so easy to set up. You can add as many mailboxes to your domain as you need. When your domain renews, your mailboxes will too. The prices are unbeatable. Their most popular mailbox is a no-brainer solution for business owners. Get access from anywhere. Use the email app you're already comfortable with. If apps aren't your thing, their webmail can be accessed wherever you are. And I should add a personal note that I am a long time, like from the beginning, Hover customer, and I moved all my domains to them from the scattered other places I had them entirely because of their service. Their prices are very, very good. Their service is just outstanding. So that's my personal experience about that. Hover isn't here to upsell you on stuff you don't need. They just want to help. They have pro-level tools. They have powerful domain and email management tools that are intuitive and easy to use, whether you're a web pro or just getting started. They're private and secure with WHOIS privacy protection included. With your domain purchase, your private information will remain just that, private. It's a great way to reduce spam and protect yourself from unwanted solicitations. Hover Connect lets you pick the service you want to use and build and host your website. Connect helps you start using your domain name with just a couple of clicks. At Hover, you're a customer and not just a source of data. Take back control of your data with reliable, tracker-free email. Hover is trusted by hundreds of thousands of customers who use their domain names and email to turn their ideas into a reality. Whether you're a developer, photographer, or small business, Hover has something for you to expand your projects and get the visibility you want. Go to hover.com/twit to get 10% off your first purchase of any domain extension for the entire first year. That's hover.com/twit for 10% off your domain extension for a full year. And we thank Hover for their support. Okay, so our guest this morning is Marten Mickos. I've known Marten a long time. He's the CEO of HackerOne, the leading provider worldwide of hacker-powered security. He was the SVP and head of cloud business at Hewlett-Packard, the CEO of MySQL AB from 2001 to 8, on the board of Nokia from 2012 to 15. He's also served on the boards of Node.js Foundation and Mozilla Messaging, and that is an abbreviation of the many things he's done over the years. So welcome, Marten, to the show.
Thank you, Doc. Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
So I want to get started by talking about your current work with HackerOne. And so tell us what that's about so we can place you in present time and then go back and visit the great constructions and wreckage that we've seen in the past as well.
Sounds excellent. I'm more interested in the future than in the past, so it's perfect for me. Our business model at HackerOne is very simple. We hack you. We break into your systems and we tell you how we did it so you can fix it. So in a way, you could say that we punch you in your face. And the good news is that you're being punched in the face by somebody you can trust rather than a criminal hacker from China or Russia or anywhere else in the world. So we do this and we do it on a community basis, a little bit like open source software is driven from communities. We have a community of over 1 million ethical hackers. So people all over the world who sign up to break into your systems. And with your permission, they will do so and tell you what they found, and then you can fix it. So it's a little bit like a see something, say something model. You could say that it's a little bit like somebody proofreading what you have written because you can't find your typos yourself, but ethical hackers can certainly find all your security vulnerabilities. So that's what HackerOne does. We've been in business for 8 years, started by hackers and security experts who got together in San Francisco to do it. We operate globally. And as I said, we have over 1 million ethical hackers signed up to help companies get their security in shape.
So I have a quick question, which is, okay, you've got 1 million ethical hackers. How do you vet their ethical nature? How do you know they're not double agents of some sort?
Well, how do I know you are not a double agent? How do you know anybody is not a double agent?
I'm not competent enough to be a double agent. Hard enough to be a single one, but that would not be a credible claim for me. Yeah. But you know,
yeah.
We're talking about clever people here.
Yeah, there are two answers to the question. The first one is, in a way, it doesn't matter because the bad guys are already attacking you. So whoever we bring to you, it can't get any worse. The bad guys never will sign up with us. They are already attacking you. So there's it doesn't make sense for any bad person to sign up with HackerOne. Secondly, of course, we do track them and we know who they are, where they came in from, IP addresses. We have their payment details, taxation details when we pay things to them. We do background checks on particular groups of them. So if we have a customer, a very sensitive customer like the US federal government or the Department of Defense, we may limit it to hackers that we actually know in person and we background checked. But the reality is that this community is amazingly has an amazing code of ethics and sense of what's right and wrong. They are the ones who are rescuing this society who has managed to build such a crappy, vulnerable internet that can't keep society going. But these people, they know how to get it in shape. They stand up and step up to help. They have the best of intent. Like, it's a wonderful, wonderful community. But of course, we do know them and we track them so we can make sure that they are good actors, every single one of them.
So is HackerOne in any way a solution towards what we heard this week about NSO Group's Pegasus software being used to target individuals? Or is HackerOne more about defending large corporations from being shaken down for ransomware?
We will help anybody, any good actor who has developed and deployed software, but we help the owner of the software, and we do so by detecting security vulnerabilities. So now what you mentioned, NSO, it's not clear that they have vulnerabilities, and the news there was not about their vulnerability. But what we make sure is we deliver the vulnerabilities to the owners of the software. So long term, when we do our job well, there won't be 0 days around because we will always find them. We will go to the manufacturer of the phone or the operating system or whatever and give it to them so they can fix it. And it will be much harder for any group to try to break in and compromise any system here. So long term, we will have the effect of just reducing the availability of 0 days. Never completely. Like, there's no black and white in this industry. It's always a question of stepwise improvement. But given the activity of ethical hackers, we will at some point render the black market for 0 days inoperable, because maybe they have 0 days, but our hackers will find them too.
So are your hackers purely serving your customers who are paying to be punched in the face? Or are you also advising communities about 0 days that you find? So, if I find a vulnerability in a piece of software that is being used by my employer, but also it implies a vulnerability in a piece of software that, say, in the GNOME Foundation software, do you also report and assist GNOME in fixing the problem?
Well, we have customers who have opened programs and we invited hackers. So that's where we put all our effort. But we have taken, as a public service, we act a little bit like the postal service. If somebody brings us a vulnerability that doesn't belong to our customer, but to some other organization, we will voluntarily go and bring that vulnerability to their attention, say, look here, our trusted hackers have found it. You are not a customer. You owe us nothing, but we want to make sure the vulnerability ends up in the right hands. So we do that as a matter of public service. We call it disclosure assistance. So anybody can come to us with it. And it's a way of just making sure that we keep fixing all the vulnerabilities there are. Right.
Now, at the Document Foundation, we've recently had some reports from an ethical hacker who has told us about what they consider to be a vulnerability in Libreoffice. The developers of Libreoffice don't actually consider it to be a vulnerability. They consider it to be working as designed, and the risk to be one that they would expect the document user to work on. How do you handle a situation where your hacker thinks they found a defect, but the developer thinks they found a feature?
The ultimate decision is with the owner of the software. They decide, if they run a program with us, they first of all will decide what's in scope. They may say, vulnerabilities of the following type are not in scope. Please don't report them to us because we are not looking for them. And they have the right to determine what's a feature and what's a bug. I'm not saying that one or the other is correct. I'm just saying that it's a duty of the owner of the software to determine what they do with the reports. All organizations that take responsibility for security will solve these problems in a very elegant way, fixing the vulnerabilities. There aren't that many conflicts there, but if there are, it is the owner of the software who will determine what the severity is and whether it's something to be fixed or not. Because it's true that there are security vulnerabilities that don't make sense to fix, that you'd rather live with the risk, or it's software that soon will be deprecated, or the potential impact isn't that severe and you have to put your resources in the most severe cases. So there's a lot of considerations like that. But the hackers know this, and they will they will argue their case, of course, but they will also respect the decision made by the one who owns and operates the software.
So what kind of a company is HackerOne, Martin? Is it a B Corp? Is it a charity? What is it?
We're a commercial entity, VC funded, regular, proper, good business.
Right. So this the ethical hacking that's going on, this is a for-profit activity that doesn't have any particular dimension which is out to serve a community or serve the public. It's purely there to serve shareholders?
No, that's a conjecture I wouldn't agree with.
Okay.
It's the best companies in the world are very useful to society. And the only way to continue to be useful to society on a sustainable basis is to have a sustainable business. So I don't see a conflict there. I actually see a symbiosis in a way between doing good for society in many different ways. Like when I joined HackerOne, I sort of thought that it would feel good to know we are making the internet more secure. And it certainly is a great inspiration. But even bigger is the fact that these ethical hackers we have, they are often young people, misunderstood by society around them, not appreciated, not knowing whether they are doing anything useful. People see them as gamers and sort of don't understand what it is. And we give them this meaning and mandate in life to do something good. And you see how they blossom, how they take more responsibility, how they stand up and sort of take pride of their profession. And you realize that if we wouldn't do this, they wouldn't necessarily find an outlet for the good they have in them. So I've sometimes compared it a little bit to the scouting movement that Robert Baden-Powell started in England 110 years ago, roughly, where he felt that the youth needed something useful to do because otherwise they would do something useless or bad. And he took them to camps and asked them to self-organize, asked them to do a good deed every day. He gave them badges and stuff and celebrated success and sat around the campfire singing songs. And in a way, that's what we do digitally. We do maybe not a campfire, but there's a karaoke, and we have badges and we have challenge coins that we give to them. Like here's one from the UK Ministry of Defense that they are giving to HackerOne hackers who participate in the program. So we're a little bit like the modern day digital scout movement and trying to do a good deed every day and thereby allowing these mostly young people to evolve into responsible, productive citizens. So that's wonderful to see.
So I have a couple of questions. First, as a simple one, do you pay these young guys and girls, to assume, or or is it an entirely volunteer effort?
They are voluntarily participating. And of course, not all of them are young. We have any age group, so everybody is welcome. The companies who are our customers, they launch programs where they declare how they will pay. So just the other day, Grammarly, a wonderful company that helps you create good text and avoid typos, they launched a competition, so-called CTF, where they said the first one to solve the problem will get $100,000. So there they have a contest where anybody can participate, and the fastest one to find the hidden gem somewhere in their software will get $100,000. So there are many ways of doing this, but our customers will declare what they pay for and how much, and the size of a bounty is typically determined as a function of the potential impact if it were used criminally. So how bad it could get, and that's why a bounty can be as much as 100,000 and several hundred thousands for a single vulnerability. But the arithmetic average is just a little bit over $1,000 per vulnerability, and the lowest bounty we pay is $100. So the range is enormous.
So there are questions coming in from the back channel, which I think I'll hand over to
excellent,
to Simon in a minute. But first, I want to get a clearer sense of the business again as well, which is you're basically a B2B business, right? Your primary customers, or maybe all your customers, are companies rather than individuals. That's correct? Right. Part I wonder for selfish reasons, because I think, well, geez, maybe I'm vulnerable here. You know, I'm a little bit of a public figure, and the amount I've been hacked is pretty small, considering. I mean, somebody once set up a porn site inside of my mail server in my house, like when you could do that easily. But still, we're all vulnerable, right? I mean, this is the internet is not in a fully mature state at this point. So, but I'm wondering whether or not you would take on individuals as customers, or if that's an option.
We would love to do it because, as you said, everybody is vulnerable and everybody may need help. The model hasn't evolved yet to a stage where it would be financially feasible to serve consumers. There's a sort of a certain minimum size you must have of the engagement to really get good hackers engaged, and there is no way of arranging it for consumers yet. But who knows what we will invent and innovate here in the next few years. It's possible that we will come up with a way of dealing with it. The thing is, of course, that for most consumers, if we detect how they are vulnerable, the responsibility for the vulnerability belongs with some vendor they are using. And then it is actually the vendor who should be our customer, and they are. Like most large tech companies and social media companies, Twitter, Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, all of these are our customers today. So in a way, we are addressing it from the bottom up, from the vendors towards the consumers.
So just to follow up on the line that I was going, and this is a question that came in from the channel that I've got up here. Yeah. How do we know that the vulnerabilities that you're finding through HackerOne aren't being sold to NSO or being given under a national security letter to the NSA rather than communicated to the communities? Since you're a for-profit company, surely it's possible that you're doing that.
It is not possible that we are doing it because we have decided not to do it. How you would know, the best guarantee you have if you have that worry is to know that when we deliver a vulnerability to the owner of the software, they can immediately fix it, patch it, remediate it, whatever action they take. So it renders the value of that vulnerability to zero at that point. Like, even if somebody would try to sell it, and there are other companies selling them, and I'm sure they are trying, we are not, but companies like Zerodium that trade in vulnerabilities, every time when we send the vulnerability to the rightful owner of the software, we kill that business. So that is the best guarantee. Like, we have a very clear business model and we don't do it, but you will know that the fact that we deliver them instantly renders them useless, as long as you fix it, of course. Customers need to take the vulnerabilities and fix them, but then they are gone.
Right.
It's not possible to exploit a vulnerability that has been fixed.
So are all of the reports that are coming in from your ethical hackers somehow auditable by people outside HackerOne, so that we can gain more confidence in that? Because I trust your word. I know that you're a man of your word.
I don't know why you ask these questions about trusting.
How can I check?
The model is completely proven in the world. There are many vendors in this space. This is a practice mandated by the US government for every government agency. The Department of Defense is doing it. The UK Ministry of Defense is doing it. The Singapore Ministry of Defense. We can talk about those worries, but they do not play into any discussion with any potential customer. This is a model that was perfected by Microsoft, Facebook, and Google over 10 years ago. And sure, we could always find something to debate, but it's not in the realm of relevant issues. There are lots of big, difficult questions in vulnerability disclosure, but this is not one. It's such a simple truth that when somebody reports a vulnerability, it can be fixed. It doesn't get more complicated than that.
Right. So just to wind that line of exploration to its conclusion. So you seem to be doing pretty well with HackerOne, and congratulations on it. It's what nearly 9 years that you've been doing it now. It's quite a long time. So what's the exit strategy for HackerOne? Is it going to get acquired? Is it going to IPO?
No, we have no exit strategy. We're in this for the mission and for doing it forever. We believe this is we really think this is similar to what Red Hat did to software and other open source vendors as well, but maybe specifically Red Hat, which took the power of the community, packaged into something that will work for enterprises, and showed the world that through openness, transparency, collaboration, they can outperform any closed source vendor. And we have a similar shift going on in security now, where there's an old world where the principles were secrecy and small groups and not sharing anything and building products and selling them. And the world is now realizing that the only powerful way to act on cybersecurity challenges is to work together and share information and drive transparency. And that's the big meaning of HackerOne and other players in this space. Like there's a lot of companies who are operating like this. It will change the whole landscape of security, but in the same way as open source changed software. Like it didn't happen overnight, as we know. We thought it would happen this year or next year, and it was a societal shift that today nobody will even doubt open source software. But when I joined MySQL, there was a lot of doubt. There's a similar trend going on in cybersecurity now, where people are realizing that transparency and collaboration are the key to good cyber defense. The only way to deal with an asymmetric threat is by pooled defense. So that's why this is much larger than any individual vendor. It will be an enormous business. It will not be hundreds of millions, it will be billions of revenue ultimately around this model. Who will get to be the main vendor remains to be seen. We at HackerOne have built a leadership position, and we feel we are very well equipped for long term of growth. But you never know. There's lots of strong vendors and smart people out there who are also working on similar concepts. So we're not taking anything for granted. But that's sort of what we do. And that's why I compare back to a Red Hat that took 20, 30 years to build into this a level of fruition that it was a public company and then got acquired ultimately by IBM for a big amount of money. So that's how we look at it. I'm sure investors will probably look for exits before that, but investors are different from the people who work in the company.
I know that I want to go further, and I know Simon does into MySQL and the whole full story of that. But first, I have to let you know that this episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. With the world starting to reopen, you want to get reacquainted with your customers, which means you need to make sure that your customers' data hasn't gone bad. Did you know that 30% of customer data goes bad each year? Stop throwing your money away and let Melissa help you. Melissa makes sure your data is accurate and current so you reach the right customers. Their tools have helped businesses maintain fresh data for over 35 years. That's why over 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. With a renewal rate of over 92%, companies love Melissa, and you will too. You can verify addresses, emails, phone numbers, and names in real time with Melissa. Melissa's global address verification service verifies addresses for 240 plus countries and territories at the point of entry. Tired of having duplicate customer information in your database? With Melissa's data matching, you can eliminate clutter and duplicates, increase accuracy of the database, and reduce postage and mailing costs. Get the information that completes your customer profiles better. Add customer demographic info to your records, such as marital status or social media handles. Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, business size, or budget. With flexible on-premise web service, secure FTP processing, and software as a service or SaaS delivery options, Melissa also has their new Lookups app on iOS and Google to search addresses, names, and more at your fingertips. Melissa continuously undergoes independent security audits to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements. Those include SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliance. Melissa's Global Support Center also offers 24/7 world-renowned support if you sign up for a service-level agreement. Inquire today. Melissa is still supporting communities and qualifying essential workers during COVID-19. See if your organization qualifies for 6 months of free service by applying online at melissa.com. We'd also like to congratulate Melissa for being named a leader in address verification and data quality by G2 Crowd in their Spring 2021 report. Make sure your customer contact data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. So Simon, you have some questions there, I know.
So I was talking to some of the other co-hosts before the show started, Martin, and I would say you're most known for HackerOne and for MySQL amongst the FLOSS Weekly hosts. What an interesting journey to go from taking over as the CEO of a hacker project in Finland to going and running an ethical hacker organization in California. Do you think that the lessons you learned at MySQL are proving valuable in what you're doing at HackerOne?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually have this philosophy in life that everything accumulates, and whatever you do, you will always say that every single step on your journey was needed. So when I joined MySQL, I knew nothing about open source. I was completely new to open source, but I knew about databases, I knew about building businesses, I knew many things. I'd worked with complex software, telecom software. But by the way, we had a service that told people where the lightning had struck, coming back to what Doug said early. So at MySQL, I felt like I had one new thing to learn, which was open source, but I knew a lot of old things. And it has been like this for every step of my career, where I realized that I thrive in being forced to learn something new, but but then I also build on what I learned. And I see so many similarities between the MySQL concept, not the business model, but the concept, and then HackerOne. Like in both cases, you are dealing with extremely intelligent people who are operating on their own volition, their own decisions. They are in charge of themselves, but they also look for a place to be together and build something together. And if you can allow that to happen, the effects are enormous. And we see the same effect at HackerOne. So that's really interesting. But then, of course, business model is completely different, and breaking into software is different from building software. So there are significant differences, but also a lot of similarities. Like at MySQL, I'll just sort of quick anecdote. If you are CEO of a famous open source project and company, you get a lot of emails from people, and many are happy, but many are also angry with you, and you get a lot of complaints. But I learned at MySQL too, whenever somebody complained to me, I sort of injected before their statement, I pretended that they were telling me, Martin, I would love to love you, but right now I cannot. Mm-hmm. And when I read it that way, I could receive any feedback without being upset and sort of seeing the value of it. It's similar when you deal with hackers. They have a lot of strong opinions, good input. Often they are correcting what they say, and they are impatient and upset. And you have to sort of prepare yourself in a similar way for that barrage of input coming your way, which is sort of coming from a good place, but maybe not always expressed in the most eloquent, compassionate way.
So, I think that's a fascinating observation there. I felt at Sun, as we looked at MySQL, that one of the things that had made MySQL such a success story was that you'd managed to hold the technology community dimension and the business dimension in a creative tension with each other. And I saw often almost a contained conflict within MySQL. Do you think that contained conflict was part of the success, or would you say it's better to remove the unrealistic outlook of the community geek and focus on the business dimension?
Yeah, wasn't it John Doerr of Kleiner Perkins who said, no conflict, no interest? And I just read a quote by Peter Drucker when he said, if you all agree, don't make a decision, or something like, don't make a decision until you have disagreement. So I do think that in business, a lot of value emanates from contrast. Doesn't fully have to be conflict, but there's a contrast that you have to deal with and resolve. And it's exciting and it's stimulating and it gets your brain going. So therefore you do benefit from what many see as conflict. I don't see that bad. Like conflict is a much worse thing that happens where people die. But this is much more, like much less severe, but it still is something where you have to resolve two dimensions that seemingly don't fit together, but maybe actually they do. And I love that part of the business, getting them to work together and showing that there is no inherent conflict. There's just a question of what is the long-term goal and what is the short-term goal. So the open source is therefore wonderful. And I've said many times that the power of open source software is not that like-minded people work together to create something great. The power is that unlike-minded people work together to create something great. Meaning, in open source software, you can collaborate even though you completely disagree on everything because you've agreed on the rules of the game. And we have a similar effect now happening with HackerOne, where we set the rules of the game, and there's a lot of different opinions on what the technical interpretation should be, but there's no question about how we engage, how you submit the vulnerability, how you receive the answer back, how it is rated and assessed and triaged. So we're trying to learn from how open source created this wonderful community where everybody can hate everybody, and yet everybody is working together.
That is a pull quote, I think. And I say that as a journalist. Place where everybody can hate everybody else and can still get work done.
Think about open source. Like how many coteries are there in open source, and they have such strong sort of damning opinions of each other, but yet it works. It all comes together.
Yeah, this is the human condition. A couple thoughts about that, and I'm going to speak here wearing my reporter hat, my journalistic hat.
First, how many hats do you have?
As few as I possibly can. That's sort of been the steady one my whole life. It's the one I've been a partner in a business for many years, but I've also always been a journalist. Basically, I can't get away from that. I've been a photographer too. I don't make any money doing that, very little, but it's still something I do. But here's the thing. When you mentioned Red Hat earlier, and Red Hat was started by Bob Young, but before Bob Young started Red Hat, he was the very first editor-in-chief of Linux Journal. And he became the editor-in-chief of Linux Journal because Phil Hughes, who started Linux Journal, offered him the job because he found Bob selling circuit boards in baggies on the back wall of some conference or something like that. And I remember because Bob found out about Linux at Linux Journal and went off to start Red Hat. But before that, Phil later told me, he said, I taught him how to spell Linux. And later when I got to know Bob, I asked him, is that true? Is that a true story that Phil taught you how to spell Linux? He said, yeah, that's actually quite true. So so that's a career arc. But here's an interesting thing about conflict, which is that as a journalist, I care about stories. And here's a problem with stories. It's both a problem and a solution. All stories are about three things. Character, you got to be interested in a person or a subject. It could be Linux, it could be Nokia, it could be Finland, it could be the team, whatever the team is. You've got a character and you've got a problem. You have conflict, something that assures conflict. That's what keeps you turning the page. That's what keeps you interested. That's what keeps people staying on this show for a whole hour, whatever it is. And you at least have movement. You have movement toward a resolution. But those things are actually at odds with the way that the world works in a non-dramatic, non-story way. So, in the case of Linus, who I probably know more about than any other character in this, because I worked with Linux Journal, he's never wanted a story to be about himself at all. He's just this maintainer. He's this guy, and what matters. And Andrew Morton told me this. He said, the only thing that matters is fixing bugs. That's the main thing that matters. Nothing else matters. We have to fix bugs. We'll be fixing bugs 200 years from now. I said, will Linux still be around in 200 years? Oh, yeah, of course. We're settled on that. And it's like the internet too. TCP/IP is done. We're not going to change TCP/IP. It works. Go ahead and drop your packets. We'll find a better way to get them through. Nobody's improved on this in 30, 40 years. It's just fine. We're not going to improve on that. But those are the things that don't have any conflict. But the conflict is interesting. And that's part of what keeps things moving. And that's just a little sort of editorial aside on my part, because it seems to be, as the CEO of a series of things, you've learned a lot here. So let me go. Oh my God, Siri's talking back to me over there, and I had turned her off earlier.
She has
probably
opinions
threw
on
the
you.
switch the wrong way. But anyway, here's the thing, and I want to go to your having worked in different organizations, the same organization at different scales. Back when I started in Silicon Valley in 1985, I made the observation, as we worked with companies where entire management teams would get thrown out and another one would come in and people would come and go, that there are basically three stages for a company, which are new, hot, and then big. And it's different at each of those stages, right? New, hot, and big. And it seems like you've been in all of those. And I'm wondering if there are any, you've talked about how you're learning all along the way. And I think that's just an important thing to do, but especially about conflicts between those things at those transitional stages where, you may get new and then you get hot before or after you get acquired, or you never get acquired, or you get big, and there are all these stages to go through. I'm just wondering how you shepherd your flock through those things.
Well, it helps to have no particular skills, because then you are not more incompetent in one stage than another. And so maybe one of my abilities is a flexibility, intellectual flexibility to operate on different levels. So I look at businesses just as things that need to be built, and there's always something to retain, but there's always something new to build. So when we became part of Sun Microsystems, we felt we were sort of rebuilding or hoping to rebuild Sun as a new company. Didn't happen, but that was a very inspiring thing, despite the huge magnitude of it, something like 17,000 employees when MySQL had 500. So I sort of saw it as a similar work, just more people around. So I don't know really how to deal with that. But then, of course, people have very specific, high-end, unique skills that they may be more successful, but also in a narrower scope. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Doc, at all, but that's my thinking on this.
That's good, but I know that Simon wants to get back to another topic, or just carry that one forward in another way.
So what I was going to ask you about, Martin, so I know that that MySQL picked up the GPL license quite late in its existence, and I know that your former partner in crime / sparring partner Monty has very much come out for the idea of transitive licensing as a way to make software sustainable. You must have thought a lot about how to pay the geeks as part of HackerOne. Do you think that open source, as we originally understood it 15 years ago, is still viable? Or do you think that we are inevitably going to have to move to a model where transitive licensing or other ways of paying the sustainer become dominant?
It's a very interesting question, because I think that what was created in the late 90s, that was free software and open source software, is absolutely sort of radical and civilization changing. And the GPL license, when it was written, to me, it is like Magna Carta or something. Like, it set the rules for more equality, more participation, and the rule of sharing and sharing alike among everybody. So I think there society did something much bigger than we have realized yet. And I think it is a reason for the power and importance of open source software. Then I also do think that it has now expanded so much that there won't be anything dominant anymore. There won't necessarily be a dominant license. There won't be a dominant business model. There won't be a dominant company. Like, as a sign of success of open source, it's not one community now. You have multiple communities. Like, back in 99, when MySQL chose the GPL license, the reason was to be included in Red Hat's distribution. Because if you were not on Red Hat's distribution, and SUSE and the others as well, but Red Hat was already leading, if you were not in their distro, you were a nobody. You had to be there. Today, that's not the case. You can build open source companies today completely irrespective of the Linux distro, even irrespective of the cloud platform. So it's much more varied. And therefore, I think there is no universal truth anymore, as we sort of tried to pretend there was 10, 15 years ago. And we had these debates about restrictive licensing, permissive licensing, and all of this. Now, there are lots of open source companies, lots of projects, lots of licensing models, lots of ways of building a business, and the stigma and orthodoxy around it has gone away. So it's not an issue. It can be like, you could do it whichever way you like. And a lot of open source companies have been predicted that they will fail because they picked or didn't pick a certain license. Those predictions have been wrong. So I take it as a good evolution in open source, that it's not so, you don't have to be an expert on licensing anymore.
Right. So another question to ask about that history with MySQL. So you were with MySQL, and then you were with Eucalyptus, and in both of those cases, you found yourself unexpectedly in a large corporation after they acquired the company. Do you think that model of small companies being acquired by large companies is going to continue to be sustainable in open source? Or do you think we are going to see open source software have to be developed by freestanding companies that plow their own course in the future? So,
all of the above.
Are we going to keep on seeing MySQL and Eucalyptus repeated, or is there going to be a change of course in the future?
All of the above. Like, look at Databricks, open source company created by professors at Berkeley, unlikely to be a great business just 5-6 years ago. Now it's an amazing business growing so fast, and they have a chance of being independent forever. They can become the acquirer of other technologies, and they can become the aggregation point of a lot of open source. So, and there are others like them. I'm using them as one example. So certainly there will be those. But then there are also so many companies started today that the number of acquisitions where a bigger company acquires a small will just keep growing. And it will be a great way for entrepreneurs and open source developers to create something of value, do it for some time and get sort of a reward for it, and get it parked or sort of find a home where it's part of a bigger thing. So I think there's room for thousands of open source companies who build something, maybe a feature, maybe something bigger, maybe a platform, and that of course is the excitement there. That when you start it, you don't know whether it really will be how independent it can be. Like when MySQL got going, it sort of didn't feel yet like something that could stand on its own feet, and we were about to go public when Sun approached us. So I think we'll have all of them, and open source entrepreneurs will do very, very well because it's a proven model and it's so powerful, and there are more people now. Like, go back to when Red Hat emerged and JBoss and MySQL, the internet was much, much smaller. Like, it was actually, all of these came from a small group of like US and Western Europe, and that was it practically. And now you get them from all over South America, Africa, all over Asia. So yes, we will see so much more.
Mm-hmm. I could ask, we're getting down toward the end here. You started by saying you care really much more about the future. Tell us what you're seeing. I mean, you've seen a lot of. It's sort of like you've seen a lot of tracks in the sky that have gone a certain direction, and you're probably more aware than anybody of how much the whole thing has grown, how much open source has grown, how much the use of open source has grown in business, how business itself has changed. I think business is not exactly like it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And business in the industrial age is only 150 years old or so. So, I mean, that's even, that's changing. And everything's digital now. I mean, we never could have a pandemic where everybody just goes home and works from home. That could never have happened in the 90s or even the aughts or maybe even the teens. So,
right.
So I'm wondering, as you especially now with the pandemic still going on for that matter, and people working from home. I mean, I have a son here who works full time. He's only at work here in Manhattan 2 days a week. The rest of the time he's at home. And his entire generation doesn't want to work in an office for the most part. They're much more like working at home. So I'm wondering if you can, give us your version, some vision of the future and where you think things are going to be going, especially in the open source world.
I think absolutely the world is becoming completely digital. And you said we are all digital now. We're not all digital yet. A lot of things in society that are not digital, but they will become digital. I think we'll have a new generation for who the physical world will be their virtual world and the digital world will be their primary world. Like I'm seeing a future where you go out in the countryside and you see a nice old farm and you say, whoa, they built a farm that looks exactly like in my game. and they will think that the farm in the fields was built afterwards as a copy of what somebody had created digitally. So I think this will flip. I also think that we have eternally in civilization a fight between control and voluntary activity, secrecy and openness. And I think that's where open source software has produced a lot of concrete, tangible financial value, but also like civic value in showing how you build community with openness and transparency and an egalitarian view of things and no coercive autocratic models. And this tension will always exist in mankind, but I would be very sad if the top-down controlled things would always win. And I'm very proud that open source represents the power of the individual and the agency of the individual to produce something that's not self-serving, but it's serving everybody. So that's why it's vital that we keep the mindset going. And I think when I look at the young people, they love it. They value individuality and diversity and freedom, and they are ready for sort of crowdsourced models, community-based models, open models. They are ready to be open about themselves much more than we old people are. So I see it going in the right direction. Maybe it won't be called open source software anymore. That was just a word invented by Tim O'Reilly, I guess, 20 years ago, or somebody else. Maybe it was Larry Augustine. But anyhow, I think the spirit of open collaboration where you respect every individual for their own merits and abilities, that's something we should apply more broadly in society.
Yeah, there's it's funny. Looking back through here, it's Christine Peterson. Christine Peterson was actually the original utterer of the term open source, but it was actually, but and we had her on the show. When was that? Show 599 last October 7th. So I actually found that. That's being digital, right? I went to the digital thing and found it, and I wanted to say I noticed I play this game in New York City, where if I'm on a subway and in a crowded subway car, but not so crowded you can't see the other side. Most of them on the lines I take, they're on facing seats, and if everybody is looking down at their rectangle, I will take my rectangle and shoot a pano photo of all of them. Right. And I did that a lot in 27, 18, and 19. And now after the pandemic, and the subways are almost as crowded as they used to be, but everybody's wearing a mask now. And they have to on the subway, it's required. I'd say about half of them are looking at their rectangles. And maybe a little more than half. It's like they're still digital, but it doesn't have the same hold on them that it did. You know, there's some shift going on there. I'm not sure what it is. And to your point that, you know, we're still physical. We're never going to stop being physical. Right? That can't happen. But our minds have been digital forever. Like it didn't take computers to make our minds digital. Our minds were, well, maybe not technically digital, like not zeros and ones, but it was electrical for sure.
Electrical, an electrical mechanism. So that's why I think it comes pretty natural to us. We think that the digital is somehow foreign to us, but no, our brain has been doing it for 200,000 years. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think one of the graces of open source is one of the same ones of us as physical, embodied, and mental human beings, which is we all look different, we all sound different, and we're also different than we were 5 minutes ago because we're learning animals, and that's part of the system, right? And so that's why you need your million, hackers helping you out, because one of them is going to have the most right idea, and all of them are going to have original ideas of one kind or another. It's just, you need that the ultimate diversity is that we are, there's that line from Monty Python where he tells everybody, you're all individuals, and one guy says, I'm not.
We have in our community 100 quadrillion neurons at work. So we have more compute power in the HackerOne community than any cloud platform anywhere.
Oh, that's a great line.
And we have more good guys than there are bad guys in the cyber world.
Yeah, and those lines shift too. It's so that's another digression we can't go down. So we have 4 questions we ask at the end of the show. So I'll get past the first one quickly. Is there anything we haven't asked that you would like us to have asked, and you can answer quickly?
Oh, that would be a topic for another podcast. I think
we'll
we
have to
covered
have
pretty
an
well.
excuse for having you back. So, okay, that's a good one. The second is, do you have anything to say about blockchain? I would bring that up because we haven't brought it up already.
I think currencies need to become digital. I think voting needs to become digital, authentication, validation, medical services. Whether blockchain is the exact right technology, I don't know, but it's maybe the most promising so far to handle those workloads.
That's good. And the last 2, what are your favorite text editor and scripting language?
On text editors, I do praise Google Docs for the collaborative features. I think they're amazing, although the rest is not amazing, but the collaboration is amazing. And then other than that, for writing, I could use anything. Microsoft Word, I use a lot, other ones. And what was the other question? That was the text.
Those were the 2 questions, and they're generally hacker questions. Usually we get VI Remax for one, and Python or something else for the second. But that's good. You're like me. I mean, I'm and I write about all this stuff. I don't necessarily.
But I will praise Grammarly again, who I mentioned earlier about the bug bounty program. Grammarly, when they are in your text, it gives such beautiful suggestions to me. I'm impressed that it can know like how I can improve my text, not just typos, but also grammar things and stylistic things. That's maybe more important than the editor.
Well, that's great. That's great. Well, Marten, it has been fantastic having you on the show, and we'll have to have you back. We said it to everybody, but we really do need to have you back because you're going to know more and have more to say and more experience to share with us. So thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Doc. This was a pleasure.
So, Simon, how'd that go for you? You had to carry some negative water there early on.
Hey, that's always been my job on FLOSS Weekly is to ask the investigative journalist questions as well as the profile piece questions. But Martin's done a great job of holding tech and business intention in each of the roles that he's played. So I think it's worth asking those questions. I didn't manage to sneak in an explanation of transitive licensing, which is where you give a license to something that will be open source one day, but it's proprietary at the moment, and you demand payment of a license fee for the time being. That's there's several of those transitive licenses. None of them are open source licenses, although they purport to become them in the end. And I didn't manage to get Martin's most famous quote in, which was to do with not worrying about not everyone paying for MySQL. He used to say that some people have got time and need money, and some people have got money and need time, and they're both welcome in an open source project. So I regret not managing to squeeze both of those in. But hey,
that's good. Well, you just did. You just did. For those of us staying all the way, that's great. I like that line about holding open source and business intention. I've always, however, disputed that a business is only doing what its shareholders want, and especially for a public business. I remember Steve Jobs once said, I couldn't, I don't remember the exact quote, but he basically said, I don't care about shareholders at all, and it's, he wouldn't do it if he did, or if he was busy caring about that. And some companies are like that and other companies are not. And it's often when the going gets tough or the company gets acquired or some other thing that some other moral imperative comes to play. But I keep thinking about what Peter Drucker said about businesses. He said, people think that business is about making a profit. He says, no, it's about making shoes. You go into business because you want to make shoes. You're a cobbler. You want to make shoes, and that's where your passion leads you. And so you do that thing, and that's true. I think for a lot of people, we wouldn't have. I'm thinking over Broadway, which is a block that way for me here, but we're at the end of Broadway, which is there it's a chain store free area. I mean, there's there are nail salons and hairdressers and guys that fix your car radio and all kinds of stuff that are just individual passions that have found a form of expression, and all, very small businesses, they're paying New York rents, but not at the fancy end of town. And that's part of the human imperative as well, and part of the human way that we are. So this has been great. Thanks so much. I think we're past time here. So thanks everybody. And for next week, you got to get 2 plugs in. First, your plugs, and then a plug for next week.
I'm now a cordless appliance. I have no plugs, yes, thanks, Ant, for putting up the website. I love people who click on the Become a Patron button at Patreon, but nobody has done that this year. At the moment, it's all being done for the sheer thrill of being able to engage in hand-to-hand combat on FLOSS Weekly.
Wonderful. My plug is for next week's show when our special guests will be each other. So we'll have a collection of myself and some co-hosts, and it's on Wednesday, which I think is either my birthday or the day before my birthday, somewhere in there. I've had too many of those so far. We were not celebrating that, but it's a moment. So thanks everybody for being with us. We will see you next week when we'll have a bunch of co-hosts on here, and so until then, take it easy.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Ant Pruitt, and I want to tell you about my show, Hands on Photography, here on TWiT TV. Each and every week, Thursday that is, I like to sit down and share with you the best tips and tricks that are going to help make you a better photographer. And it's not always about Photoshop. It's not always about just having the biggest and baddest and bestest camera. It can be the simplest of things, like leave your eye open when you're looking through the viewfinder. All of these simple tips can really help step your photography game up. So subscribe to the show today. That's twit.tv/hop. And I look forward to talking to you soon.